This program is provided by Universal Genesis.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. This is where we take a stack of pretty challenging sources and we just pull out the core ideas, giving you a real shortcut to being well-informed.
And today, we are definitely doing one of our most ambitious deep dives.
I think so, yeah. We're connecting two absolute titans of Western thought, St. Augustine and G.W.F. Hegel.
And our sources are really asking this profound question. Can you take a religious structure, a whole architecture of belief, and translate it completely into abstract, universal philosophy?
Right.
We're looking at these structural comparisons, showing how Augustine's idea of the two cities, the heavenly and the earthly, wasn't just an influence. It was, you could say, the essential blueprint for Hegel's entire three-part system.
That's the mission today, isn't it?
Yeah.
To really get how Hegel took the entire meaning of the kingdom of God, the whole drama of creation, fall, recovery, and just fundamentally rebuilt it.
Reconstitute it?
Yeah, into abstract logic. I mean, the thesis we're digging into is that the deep structure stayed exactly the same, even though the words changed from theology to, rationalist philosophy.
It's like finding the same skeleton under two completely different costumes. Once you see that underlying grammar, you can decode centuries of thought.
Okay, then. Let's dive right into this conceptual architecture. So, the central, and I have to say, really surprising claim from our sources is this. The starting point of Hegel's entire philosophical encyclopedia, his logic, is structurally identical to the absolute state of perfection you read about in theology.
Right. We're talking about Augustine's heavenly city, or you could even say the biblical Garden of Eden.
That seems like a huge intellectual stretch if all you know about Hegel is how dense his writing is.
It does, but the thing is, the equivalence is pretty much undeniable because Hegel himself confirmed it. He famously said that his logic is essentially a description of the movement God made in himself before creating the world.
And that quote is just a critical piece of the puzzle. It completely transforms the logic from this, dry set of rules into the ultimate state of pre-creation.
It's a state of pure form.
Exactly.
And this original state, whether you want to call it Eden, the heavenly city, or for Hegel, the pure concept, it shares these specific defining qualities. It's the realm of the pure, untainted idea.
And the sources also bring Plato into this, right? His world of ideas.
Yeah, they loop Plato in here because it's the same concept, a flawless, timeless, conceptual reality.
So what are the characteristics of that perfection? If it isn't physical, what actually defines it?
Its defining quality is just absolute self-consistency. It's harmony. In this realm, there's no lack, no death, no suffering, and this is the crucial part, no contradiction.
Reason and order just perfectly match up.
They coincide completely. In Hegel's language, this is the realm of the pure concept, the big riff. It's the divine mind in perfect self-reflection before anything else exists.
So if contradiction only happens when that pure concept bumps up against something external, then this starting point, the big riff, is basically God's perfect, eternal inner life. It's sealed off from all the messiness of the created world.
That's exactly the implication. It's a three-in-one identity for the absolute beginning. The perfect rational structure before all the complications of creation kick in.
That's a powerful starting point. But, it brings up a question for me. Why did Hegel, this philosopher of absolute reason, why did he pick this specific three-part structure? Where did the sources say this idea came from?
Well, the path leads directly back to theology, specifically to that foundational Christian principle you find in the opening of John's Gospel. In the beginning was the Word, or logos.
Let's spend a second on logos. It's such a loaded term in philosophy and in religion.
It really is. The Greek term logos is so much richer than just word. It means reason. It means order, structure, principle, all at once.
So when John opens his gospel, he's not just talking about a spoken word.
No, not at all. He's making a huge claim. He's asserting that the very foundation of all reality is rational, ordered structure. And that structure is eternal and divine.
And this is where Hegel steps in. He sees that theological first principle and basically says, okay, I can translate that. I can turn that divine structure into pure philosophical logic.
Precisely. The sources confirm that Hegel's entire encyclopedia, his whole system, is a deliberate three-stage translation of this Christian narrative. He just substitutes his technical philosophical concepts for the theological terms, but the actual flow of the story is identical.
That idea of a perfect translation is fascinating.
Right.
But by moving from language like, say, grace or redemption to concept and spirit, did he lose anything important? I mean, was the translation actually perfect?
That's a great question because Hegel was walking a very, very careful line. Our sources really emphasize that as a Protestant thinker, he consciously avoided the specific religious vocabulary.
Things like sin or miracle.
Exactly, personal redemption. He felt those were too particular, too tied to faith to be universal. But he fundamentally believed the structure of creation, fall, and salvation was the universal truth.
So his job, as he saw it, was to make that true structure available to pure reason without needing faith to get there.
Yes, he was trying to prove that the underlying truth of Christianity was completely and totally rational.
So can we break down those three stages, see how the theological story maps onto Hegel's rational one?
Of course. Stage 1 is the absolute beginning, the eternal logos. For Hegel, this becomes his logic God's pure self-thought before creation. This is the world of pure possibility and perfection.
And stage 2 is when that perfection is broken or externalized.
Right. That's his natural philosophy. This is the philosophical translation of the fall and the creation of the physical world. The logos moves out of its perfect self-containment and becomes, well, alienated.
In physical space, time, matter.
Yes, it's the world of chance, contingency, death. Structurally, it's the exact equivalent of Augustine's earthly city.
And then finally, the journey back home, the recovery.
That's the third stage, the philosophy of spirit, or Geist. This is salvation history. The logos, which lost itself in nature, starts this long process of recovering its own identity. It starts to know itself again through the development of human consciousness.
Culminating in art, religion, and then finally philosophy.
And the sources are very clear on this. This whole journey, logic, nature, and spirit is meant to be a philosophical depiction of the history of the word that was in the beginning.
That is just a monumental act of structural translation. And it says so much about the systematic nature of both of these thinkers. It's not just the content that links them, it's their method.
It is. And this is why our sources highlight Augustine's City of God, not just for what it says, but for its style, its philosophical prose. It starts by laying out a systematic conceptual argument, this dual structure of the two cities, time versus eternity, instead of just jumping into a story.
So Augustine's method of using conceptual arguments made him the perfect prototype for Hegel's, dense systematic encyclopedia.
Absolutely. They share that same commitment to mapping out the ultimate structure of reality and history through reasoned argument, which helps us understand why Hegel felt so comfortable just lifting and translating the whole Augustinian framework. He had already inherited this idea that theological truth could be presented as a tightly structured philosophical system.
Okay, let's lock in that full conceptual architecture for you, the listener. Let's run through that deep structure one more time.
Think of it like parallel tracks running through history. Track 1 is the pure form. Theologically, this is the heavenly city, defined by divine love, perfect knowledge. Philosophically, for Hegel, this is logic, the pure concept, eternal order.
Then track 2 is the externalization. Theologically, that's the earthly city, which is all about self-love and sin. Philosophically, it's natural philosophy, the world of chance, matter, total alienation from the perfect idea.
And finally, track 3, the restoration. For theology, that's the history of God's kingdom moving toward its fulfillment. Philosophically, that is the philosophy of spirit, the painful but necessary journey where reason recovers itself and realizes its own perfection within human history.
Now let's drill down into that middle part, the earthly city, because the sources gave us some really interesting historical context here. So the earthly city is defined by self-love, and for Augustine, writing in the 5th century, its primary symbol was the Roman Empire.
Right. The context here is absolutely crucial. The City of God was written after the Goths sacked Rome in 410 AD, and a lot of pagans were blaming Christianity for destroying the empire's traditions and weakening it.
So Augustine had to defend the faith.
He had to, and he did it by explaining that Rome was always destined to fall, with or without Christianity.
Why? I mean, why was it destined to perish? It was so magnificent, so orderly.
Because its foundation was what he called Civitas terrena, the earthly city. Augustine totally conceded Rome's magnificent organization and its power, but he argued its motive was fundamentally flawed.
It was driven by ambition, pride, the relentless chase for glory and power.
Which is just a profound form of self-love or amour-suri.
So even the most powerful, most systematic, earthly political structure is temporary if its ultimate driving force is the human ego instead of a divine principle.
Precisely. The earthly city is built on sand because its goals are purely temporal, purely of this world. Augustine's whole point was that the city of God is eternal. It's built on faith and the love of God, and that makes it immune to the collapse of empires. He wasn't celebrating Rome's downfall. He was explaining its historical necessity.
That historical grounding is so essential. It makes those abstract terms like logic and spirit feel much more tangible when you look at the Hegelian map. And staying with Augustine for a minute, let's look at how he handled the creation story. Since the earthly and heavenly cities come from human choice, you would think Adam and Eve would be right there at the beginning of the argument.
You would.
Did the sources say they function as narrative characters?
This is one of those really surprising nuggets you get from the sources. Adam and Eve are decidedly not central in the opening of the City of God. They don't even show up until books 12 through 15.
Wow. So why is that?
The reason is conceptual, not narrative.
So they're used as ideas, not as like protagonists in a story.
That's exactly right. Augustine treats them conceptually to establish the origin of the two competing loves that split humanity. The story of the fall, and then the conflict between Cain, who represents the earthly city, and Abel, who represents the heavenly city. It all serves as a kind of symbolic history.
So he's arguing that history itself is this unfolding conflict.
Yes, a conflict between these two groups. So he only brings in the origin story when it's necessary to explain the human will and that fundamental choice between self-love and divine love.
It makes perfect sense then why Hegel, who was really only interested in concepts and the unfolding of history, would find Augustine such a compelling philosophical ancestor. The story is secondary. The systematic logic is primary. So what does all of this mean for you? Well, the key takeaway is that the next time you encounter the dense, maybe seemingly impenetrable philosophy of Hegel, remember the shortcut.
The sources reveal that the deep structure of the most influential system in modern Western thought, logic, nature, spirit is a deliberate, highly rational translation of that foundational Christian structure: creation, fall, and redemption.
It's the ultimate conceptual recycling project, and, understanding this parallel grammar is your master key.
That structural similarity lets you see right through the complexity. If you can just recognize that Hegel's logic is Eden, his nature is the fallen world, and his spirit is salvation history, the whole map just lights up instantly, no matter how challenging the vocabulary is.
That provides an incredible path toward mastering his whole system. But it does leave us with one powerful, provocative thought for you to consider.
Mm-hmm.
If Hegel was so successful at translating salvation history into a self-moving logical system where every stage is, pre-established by reason,
Mm-hmm.
does that mean all of human history is just the playing out of a philosophical script? Or does true contingency, that messy, ambitious reality of the earthly city, still have room to resist the relentless logic of the absolute spirit?
Something to think about.
Think about that, and we'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.
This program is provided by Universal Genesis.